Welcome to Burning River Baseball on Burning River Radio. I am your host, Joe Koblitz, and I'm here with Justin Latta, both of
Hey.
Burning River Baseball. It is the second week of spring training games for the Cleveland Indians in Goodyear, Arizona, and all sorts of exciting things are happening, which is the whole point of spring training.
Anything baseball related is exciting.
No, but that's the point of spring training. They always say you go into the first week of spring training, and they always say, "What's our number one goal?" Healthy.
Not to get hurt.
So I guess we could. If you wanted to go through the roster and list off the people, there are more people healthy than hurt. But you lose. Brantley's not back yet, although he's supposed to be taking some more swing. He just took batting practice 2 days in a row, so that's good. Kipnis is not quite back yet, but he's supposed to come back next week. And today, at the game that I was at, Tyler Naquin decided to foul a ball off his foot.
Ew.
And couldn't walk. They got a cart.
Ooh.
Yes, a cart came on the field, dragged his ass off. They kind of towed him. They put a rope around him, tied it to the back, and pulled him off the field.
That doesn't seem good.
Now, the outfield was already kind of a mess. Now, they called it a bruise. He had x-rays done, and they're going to release the x-rays tomorrow. So if you're listening to this, you probably already heard the results. But we're going to go ahead and speculate. There's two outcomes. One is it's a bruise. He's out 2 days, and he's back, and he's fine. The other is the Zimmer, 2 years ago in AA?
That was
he
his
broke his foot.
Now. Wasn't it?
Oh, was it? I thought he broke his foot.
I want to say he had it might have been, you're right, it might have been a foot. I thought it was a shin or a leg thing. I thought he had some sort of
it's a lot easier to break a bone in your foot because there's so many little tiny bones in your feet. It's really easy. Just like, what was that with Carrasco, where they're making a big deal if it's his fifth metacarpal or tarsal or carpal.
There's too many bones
metacarpal that he broke. But it doesn't matter. It's a little tiny bone in your hand. So if Chisenhall broke something, he may have broken a little tiny bone in his foot. And given that he's not a DH, I would say that's not something he's going to play through. And a broken foot, what's that, 2 months, 1 month, something like that? A month plus 2 weeks of rehab?
That could be like 3 months, really. Depends on what he broke, probably.
So anything in there, if it's broken, he's not on the opening day roster, essentially. So now, instead of just looking at what we could have been talking about today, which is what do they do if Kipnis doesn't make the opening day roster, now we have what do they do if Tyler Naquin doesn't make the opening day roster.
I'm okay if neither of them playing on opening day because they have quality options finally.
Okay, now you don't include Brantley in that either. So you've got an outfield of Chisenhall, Geyer, Almonte.
Oh.
And that's essentially two starters. That's your right field and center field. Now you need a left field and another outfielder who can play center field without counting Brantley and Naquin.
Okay, so if those three guys aren't there, you've got, I guess, we haven't seen him yet, but I guess Austin Jackson's an option. You've got Almonte, you've got Zimmer and Allen. I guess Allen's probably not really an option to them. I think Zimmer's more of an option, unfortunately. Then you have Chisenhall and Geyer, and then you have Diaz play third, and you have Ramirez play second.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about Kipnis being out too. Yeah, I think that was one of the obvious solutions, and other people have already said it, showing how obvious it was. Other people I've talked to at the ballpark have come up with, it's like, you don't even have to say anything to them. They just go, okay, so who replaces Kipnis? And the answer is Jose Ramirez with Yandy Diaz or Giovanni Urshela, depending on who you're talking to.
I guess you could have.
But I think most of people see that.
Third.
Yeah, I think most people see that Diaz is a better bat than Urshela. And if you're going to lose Kipnis, who's such an important bat in the lineup, you'd want Diaz at third just to make up for that part of the offense that's missing, especially if you're talking about now also missing possibly. Now, this is obviously worst case scenario, Brantley and Naquin. Then you're really going to need that extra offense.
Yeah, hopefully 2 of the 3 are ready for opening day. I would guess that Kipnis will be. I don't think there's any reason to freak out about Kipnis because he's taking batting practice.
Well, the hard thing is the Indians are always so vague about these things, and that suits them, and that's right for the team. The team is going to be at its best advantage if nobody knows where they're hurting, or if nobody knows how badly they're hurting. But for a fan, and for somebody writing about the team, it sucks not knowing the truth, not knowing exactly what's going on. Even if you're there, and you see it, it's still not. I mean, I've seen Kipnis hit, I've seen Brantley hit. Just seeing it is not enough. Like, you need to know more than they would ever let out in the media, and they're always close-lipped on this type of stuff.
Which is funny because last year, how many people spent all this time blaming the media for the injuries, or blaming the media for not knowing more? Like, they're supposed to dig deeper and figure it out for themselves. But I don't know, what are you supposed to do if the team is so tightly guarded? Like you said, they should be tightly guarded because less is more for them as far as information. But not the
absolutely.
media's fault that Kipnis won't be ready.
Well, but see, we don't know if he will, because they call it. I mean, you can call it something tendonitis or whatever, and that can mean a whole list of things of what it actually is. Just like I was joking. I mean, you can call a bruise a contusion, and that can mean a whole bunch of things. So it's very difficult to say whether a guy's going to be out or not. I think you tweeted today that Brantley hitting 2 days in a row was a good sign that his shoulder wasn't bothering him. He needed to test it 2 days, even if it was bothering. I mean, like, it's really hard to tell on this type of thing. So we're going to kind of have to sit in this unknown for a while.
Yeah, until these guys actually start playing games and doing things that you would do on a 162 game season, I guess. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, batting practice is great and all and whatnot, but until they actually start playing in games and proving that there's no issues, then I guess you're right. You're kind of in a holding pattern. And I don't know. I'm just not in full freak out mode with Kipnis. I know some people are like genuinely concerned.
I'm not freaking out about any of this. That's kind of what I said. And Mike Millerigno always, like, he'll always go, and one of the problems is people don't understand when he's joking. I've known him for a very long time, and I don't always understand when he's joking. I get it most of the time. But he'll make a joke, like he's trying to get me to freak out, and other people are reading this and being like, "Oh no," panic mode. But so he said something about Kipnis being out for 2 months or something, like, just going off of what other people have had with similar-ish injuries. But it's hard to say if it is a similar injury or not, because he could be back in 2 days, which is kind of what we're expecting within the next couple of days. He's going to be back in the lineup and hitting.
Yeah, I guess once he starts hitting,
anyway,
I mean, people thought they were panicking, and some people were legitimately panicking. I don't know. I think it's just interesting how people read into it, because Hoynes wrote an article early in the week about it, saying, oh, he's had a setback, or he's not DHing until next week, and then Jordan Bastion wrote, oh, he's progressing the way they said he was going to. So it depends on the way you read it, I guess, or the way it was presented. But it sounds like he's progressing rather than having setbacks.
Yeah, we'll see. So back on the outfield, replacement line, we'd mentioned Austin Jackson. He has not played in a game yet, so he's essentially the same place as Michael Brantley is, as far as we're aware. I wouldn't count on him on opening day if he's already. I mean, there's still a month left before opening day, so there is time for anybody to get back and get a full month of spring training games. But I wouldn't necessarily count on him. We have been seeing a lot of Bradley Zimmer and Greg Allen in games, though.
I'm okay with this.
So I hope. Well, we've also been seeing Ronnie Rodriguez, and he played particularly poorly today. And some of these other young guys, Eric Staymetz a lot, just kind of getting a look at him. But I think with Zimmer's like the one guy out of that group who maybe could end up being a real participant of this team this year. If not an opening day, then mid-season.
Did you say Ronnie Rodriguez, or who are you talking about?
Zimmer.
Oh, yeah.
Bradley Zimmer.
Yeah. Sorry, my mind dealing with something over here. Yeah, no, I think I don't see why he wouldn't be. I guess it depends on how the injuries go and how well guys play. I was listening to one of the Fangraphs fantasy baseball podcasts, and their prospect guy who was saying that He thinks that Zimmer could play well enough to get Naquin sent back to the minors. So it seems like guys are pretty confident at some point he'll contribute at the major league level. I don't see why he wouldn't, especially with this whole swing change thing.
All right, why don't you go into that a little more?
Yeah, that was interesting. Jordan Bashan had that article earlier. It was about just him kind of rebuilding the swing from the ground up. Jim Rickon, who's their well, he's kind of he used to be the hitting coach at Lake County. He's been kind of all around the system. Who's the roving hitting instructor now, but now he's kind of opening up his stance, a little more balanced. He's not leaning out over the plate as much, finishing a swing. He just looks like he's finishing a swing a lot better and not pulling away to one side. I don't know. It's really interesting. And they said that, there was a possibility that when he started doing that, making that change in season, that his numbers might suffer. And they want to say that's accounting for some of his issues in AAA last year. Because I think the quote was, well, if he bats 320 in the minor leagues, but he can't do it in the majors because of his mechanics, what good are they? And that makes sense. So if it cuts the strikeout rate down, I really wonder how that changes things. Because, you can look at guys over the last couple of years like Jake Lamb in Arizona and some other guys who have made, pretty major alterations to their swing have seen really good results on different things. So I think if this thing works out, he's really going to have a better chance to make an impact. And maybe he could, even if Naquin's healthy, maybe he could force a change. I just don't know how the Indians view that. The Indians are so hesitant to make that kind of change. When they already have a guy at the major league level playing average or decently, they won't bring a prospect up just to take his place out of nowhere. There has to be like an injury almost. They're like so afraid to replace incumbents, even if there's better talent behind them.
I wouldn't worry about that at all in this case. I think also this season is different. We've already seen that. We've seen that last season was different. When they needed to do something last year, with the exception of a couple confusing moves, they made the move that they needed to make. And some of the moves they made were way more extreme than anything they'd ever done before, like getting Andrew Miller from New York. I've never seen them do anything like that. And so then, like signing at Encarnacion, we're seeing them do things that they've never done before. And I do think, and we talked about this last time, that they are going to try to go with a more veteran team. But it's not like Naquin's. It's such an odd distinction, like calling somebody something all of a sudden makes them that thing. That's something we've talked about a lot on different podcasts over the years. And so when is a guy a veteran? When all of a sudden he gets that veteran moniker? Like Naquin's only been on the team for one season, and he struggled at the end of last year. So is he really that much more advanced than Zimmer? Zimmer went to college. He's been in the minors for a few years. They should essentially be almost at the same exact spot. So to call Naquin a veteran with playoff experience or whatever you want to call him, to me that's almost like a game of semantics. You're not really saying it doesn't mean that he's more advanced a baseball player than Zimmer is just because he played a couple more games than he did.
Yeah, also Naquin's a platoon player too, which I think plays into it. If he's got a limited amount of at bats because of he can't play against left-handers, I guess that changes things too. But I don't know. I just feel like if they're getting by with what they have, they're so unwilling to make a change sometimes. And maybe they will this year because of the circumstance. He said, they signed Encarnacion and they've done different things. But look how long it took to cut Uribe last year.
Yeah, and I think that's part of that veteran thing. But I think as soon as Ramirez showed he could play every day, he was playing every day. He wasn't playing at third every day, but he was playing every single day, literally every single day. Whether it was left field or third base or second base or whatever, he was in the lineup every day. So I think, Zimmer shows he can play in spring. And somebody said that the only reason Naquin, it might have been Tom Hamilton the other day, said the only reason that Naquin made the team last year out of spring was because of an injury. That's not true at all. He destroyed the ball all spring, and there were 2 weeks left in spring training when they announced he made the team. There was plenty of time for him not to. They could have waited. If it was an injury, they would have waited to the last minute. He earned his spot. If Zimmer earns his spot, they won't not necessarily. They may Lindor him and make him wait till June. Finish his litany of problems. No, that was a Mike Brandyberry thing. Anyway,
what? Litany of problems?
that's what they said about Lindor last year. Week 1, Francona says he's the most advanced player I've ever seen. He's so mature and he's ready to be in the majors right now. Week 4 of spring training, they said he had a litany of issues he had to work on in minors before he could come up. The litany of issues being his service time.
Sure.
So I could see them pulling that on Zimmer as well. But I think if he plays like crazy this spring, I could definitely see them also bring him up. And for Naquin, now spring numbers don't always correlate to regular season, but for Naquin they did.
For a little bit.
He ended up hitting pretty much the same. Well, I mean, for the entire season, he still hit over 300 for the year. I mean, he hit for more power than we were expecting him to. He didn't really run a whole lot necessarily, but I mean, he hit better than we were expecting him to, essentially, and it came off came out of that hot spring.
You also forget that Almonte's suspension played into that too. But if he's hurt now, who's to say Zimmer can't do the same thing? I mean, if an injury really did open up a chance to put Naquin on the roster and the suspension helped of Almonte, but who's to say if Naquin's hurt, if Zimmer can't do the same thing? And I hope that's the case. I mean, I have not been bothered by the service time thing in the past.
Well, they might
like
not
a lot
even
of
have
people.
a choice.
What?
Yeah, they might not even have a choice. If Brantley's out and Naquin's out and Jackson isn't ready, that's not even, you don't even have an opportunity. There's no way. Were you going to go with Daniel Robertson?
Ugh.
I mean, who's going to be the next guy up? They have. You have to go with Zimmer if that becomes the point that you're reaching. Now, if Brantley's on the team, then it changes things. If Naquin's on the team, that changes things. Then you're talking about him playing on. But if you do have 2 injuries in the outfield, you pretty much have to.
I just hope they don't worry.
And it doesn't even mess up his service time. Yeah, I hope they wouldn't worry about it. Anyway, we should move on. I wanted to talk about the World Baseball Classic stuff after we actually get some games, and the first game is tomorrow at 4:30 in the morning. So I hope you're all up and watching.
I will not be.
Tyler Krieger and Team Israel go up against Team Korea.
It's like 4:30 in the morning.
4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, no.
Which is 6:30 my time, so I'm good. That's when I get up.
Let me know how that goes.
Oh wait, no, it's not. It's 2:30 my time. I did that backwards.
You'll still be awake.
That's terrible. Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna skip that one. But actually, Team Israel plays again later. They play at 10 o'clock at night or something like that. So I'll watch that game. They play twice tomorrow, which is really once a day because they're in Korea. It's just confusing.
I'm not talking about the World Baseball Classic. We talked about it enough last week. You know, I don't care other than guys being healthy. That's really
okay. Anyway, so I wanted to go into a more long-term topic with the increase in StatCast. There was an article that was brought to my attention the other day of articles. Actually, now I'm thinking of it. One of them was pro, one of them was anti, essentially. And maybe it was the same one, and he was pro and anti. And now I'm confused. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, the Jeff Passan article about StatCast WAR.
Yeah, so that was the positive one, and then there was another one that was anti, that was essentially talking about nerds in their basement again.
Somehow I didn't come across that one.
Yeah, those always pop up on my timeline, or whatever you call Twitter. People retweeting things. It wasn't from someone I followed. I think it was Keith Law. He wrote Smart Baseball, right?
Smart Baseball, SMRT.
Yes. I think he was the one that retweeted that one at the point. But essentially, he was talking about how nerdy baseball fans don't even need to watch the game. They just get all their information from the numbers and stuff like that. Of course, we watch the game. I mean, I would challenge pretty much anybody that I've been to more baseball games than them. People that are 3 times my age, and I would say 2 times my age, whatever you want to say. But I've been to more baseball games and watched more than pretty much anybody else I know. So I'm there. I mean, most of the time during the summer, I watch an Indians game on TV, and then I go to an AZL Indians game live in the same day. So I'm doing double, triple headers some days.
Yeah, you have that time difference advantage.
Anyway, yeah, exactly. That's why you gotta live in Arizona, because we have baseball all year. I watch baseball every single month of the year except for December and January. Those are the only 2 months we don't have any baseball games.
I'm gonna have to move down there.
Anyway, I want to say about first thing about the advanced stats and people who don't like WAR and that type of thing. The people who created WAR just wanted to understand and analyze baseball better. They don't hate the sport. They aren't necessarily the people who are trying to change the rules and all these other things. They just wanted to be able to compare players, because how can you compare the best hitter in baseball in 1910 and then the best hitter in baseball in 1920 and then the best hitter in 1930? Like these eras are so different. The amount of offense changed first, because in the 1910s it was the dead ball era, but you had a large disparity in talent. There were a few really great players, and there were a ton of really shitty players. So what wound up happening is guys were hitting 400 all over the place because there were so many terrible pitchers. So there were a lot of really big extremes, but there was no power. And then you had the 30s where there was just a ton of great players, and everybody was hitting all over the place. You just had great players on both sides. And how are you going to compare players from that era to then the 60s where pitching took over again, and today 90s where hitting took over, and then the 10s where pitching took over? It's so hard to compare those. So WAR was essentially, and VORP originally, and all those other things, they're trying to normalize these numbers so you can actually compare these players and see which players are similar, which players are better than other players. And that it's not trying to offend people. It's not trying to take anything away from the actual game being played. It's trying to add to it. So now, StatCast, which has some truly incredible stuff as far as being able to break apart a play from reaction time to the distance a guy ran and the speed he ran to the route efficiency, all these things defensively that we've never been able to look at before. And they have offensive stuff too that I can't even fathom. I just love the defensive stuff at this point. And they're trying to do a WAR type of thing too. And I don't even know exactly what they're basing it off of. I'm assuming it won't be stats at all, that it has something, it's based on something else. But all of this is trying to understand the game and analyze the game better. It's not trying to take it away. It's not people trying to say they're smarter than you. It's not supposed to be easy to calculate. It's supposed to be accurate. So that's my primer on this, I guess. Now, you probably know more about the actual details than I do, I would assume.
Of StatCast WAR? I mean, I read the article. I mean, it just
of all this.
I would consider myself an expert.
All this,
I mean, I've had to do a lot of reading to catch up to a lot of people, because I think when I was younger, I was like a younger baseball fan, 19, 20 years old. I was kind of the get off my lawn, like stop, watch a game and don't look at your spreadsheet kind of guy. So, and then as I got older, I think I just read more, and I think it makes a lot of sense, because like in reality, it should have made things like Hall of Fame voting a lot easier, because now you can compare, like you said, compare eras a lot easier. Like when you use things like OPS plus or weighted runs created plus, you're able to do it against the league, and you're able to do it for a ballpark adjusted, because like you were saying, historically, look at Yankee Stadium and the short left right field porches. Look at stadiums that were huge and had huge dimensions. How do you compare guys that hit and pitched in those stadiums to a ballpark like Philadelphia or Yankee Stadium now that has a short right field porch? Like, now all ballparks have the same dimensions, and guys are getting inflated numbers for hitting there. And that's the interesting thing about StatCast that they do WAR, is because a lot of things they do is they overlay home run distance. So like they'll overlay it with ballparks. Like, so when a guy who hits 30 home runs in Yankee Stadium is a left-hander, like Didi Gregorius randomly hit 20 home runs last year, and everyone's like, well, that's a farce because it's Didi Gregorius, and look at the short porch. How many of those would have a home run elsewhere? But that things like StatCast and advanced stats allow you to compare that. So it should have made it easier. Instead, it's people just complaining on both sides, and You got, guys that shouldn't be voting in the
Yeah, and
Hall of Fame
I think
anymore.
yeah, part of this is like it's multiple facets of different arguments too, and you end up with some of this partisan politics thing where you pick a side and you stay on that side. As with everything, I'm going to jump right in the middle here, and I'm going to say when we evaluate older players who are done, they're not playing anymore, we're just looking back on their career. I really like to look at stolen bases. You look at the slash line. You look at his runs batted in, his home runs, his doubles. Those are the things that he physically did. And I look at them in a historical context. When I'm looking at a guy now, and I want to know how he's going to hit next year, you throw away all those things, except maybe the slash line. And you throw away batting average. So you're looking at like OBP and slugging a little bit, but you're also looking at batting average on balls in play and a lot of these other, even like the WRC plus and that type of thing. You're looking at more on that level if you're trying to predict how a guy is going to play. If a guy hit 100, knocked in 100 runs, it has absolutely nothing to do with the next season. And I think that's where some of the split is on some of these people. Like the more advanced people only want to use advanced stats, even for guys who retired decades ago. And the old school guys only want to use old school stats, even on guys where they're trying to predict what they're going to do next year. I mean, if you have batting average on balls in play, and you can see that if a guy hits 400, it's completely unsustainable, and the max he could possibly do is 375, and it probably is going to drop down to more like 325 or even lower. You can see that, and you know what's coming, and then everyone else gets mad at that player, Tyler Naquin, when he starts to suck. But it wasn't his fault. He was just really lucky, and he set those standards up. The people who understood what was going on the whole time never got that high on it. Yeah, I feel like you just have a more realistic. Now, if a player like I think Ty Cobb's career batting average on balls in play was 375. Well, you're not going to say he's going to regress. He had that in his entire career. Like, that's who he was. That's what he did. So we can look back and say his batting average is legitimate. His slugging percentage is legitimate. We know that because he did it for years, and that's what happened. We're not trying to predict.
No one said Ty Cobb was lucky for his whole career.
Well, and we're not trying to predict what Ty Cobb is going to do next year.
You don't want to know?
That was the joke. that was the joke, and I think it was in Cobb. I don't remember if it was something that actually happened in real life or if they made it up for the book / movie. But it was a quote. He said, "How would you hit against the pitchers today?" And he said something like, "Oh, I could probably only hit about 300, but I'm 60." Something like that. Because they were just asking if he could, like, in his prime, and he was saying, "No, like I could go out there today and hit 300 still."
I believe that probably came from him. Yeah.
I think that was one of his. I misquoted him anyway, but
No, I agree with you. I
I
think
find
it's
it
a
amusing.
it's a good predictor. I think a lot of teams are using that. That's how a lot of teams are making their player acquisition decisions. I mean, they're looking at that stuff when they, assign a player or make a trade or how they promote guys. They're looking at all that stuff, of course, and they're probably looking at things we don't even have access to, which hopefully we will with how much more StatCast rolls out. Because one of the guys who's responsible for all this, his name is Tom Tango. I guess that's not his real name. That's what he goes by. But he was quoted in that article saying that they're only about the third inning as far as what they've released that StatCast can do or what they've captured. So I
Well, yeah, and
think
if you go to the stat, like you'll see teams, especially like when you watch the game on TV now, every once in a while, and it may be an ESPN thing or maybe an MLB TV thing because STO doesn't do it, so it's got to be like a proprietary thing. But they'll show when an outfielder makes a catch, they'll show the route, they'll show like I said, the reaction time, the angle he took towards the ball, the efficiency rating, for the angle he took towards the ball, the speed he ran, and all that stuff. I think STO shows it every once in a while, but very rarely. I don't know where that information is. Like, I physically can't find it. You can go to StatCast, MLB StatCast, and it's got some things like exit velocity and speed pitch and stuff, or pitch speed and stuff like that, but it has very limited information there. So that's the
Um,
kind of thing I'd love to see all the time. You find your average, you look at an outfielder and you find his average reaction time, his average speed, like that type of thing. You can learn way more than that. Fielding percentage for outfielders is retarded. It never made any sense. So if you're an old school stat guy and you're trying to figure out who the best outfielder is and you're going by fielding percentage, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't understand why
wasn't that
you're
one of the
wasting your
arguments
time
about
with that.
Rocky
But these,
Colorado?
it could be, I don't know.
Well,
What's the
people used to
argument?
say like he was a good outfielder, but his fielding percentage was only high because he couldn't get to any balls because he had terrible range. So he just didn't make a lot of errors because he couldn't get to a lot of fly balls that other outfielders could get.
That's very possible. And a lot of times, an outfielder's fielding percentage will get killed by their arm because so many errors called on outfielders are because of overthrows or underthrows when they're trying to get an assist. Well, that's an aggressiveness thing too. So I mean, if you it never made any sense. Like, you're trying to count, you should have a fielding percentage on balls caught, fielding percentage. Like, if you were going to do it that way, fielding percentage on throws, fielding for every position. What if you're a second baseman and you keep messing up the feeds when the shortstop is underhanded to you? But your throws are always on target, and you're great with the glove when you get balls hit at you. So if you go to Fangraphs, they do that. They have everything split up, by number, and that's what I've been using for the last at least 3 or 4 years. Are those advanced defensive stats on Fangraphs? And anytime you can give me even more advanced defensive stats, I'm into it.
I think by your argument, by the way, I think every throw Coco Crisp ever made probably should have been an error.
Well, yeah, but then of course it also depends on the outcome, and that's one nice thing about this stuff is it's saying, okay, so the hardest hit ball last year, according to exit velocity, was Avisail Garcia hit 125-mile-an-hour ball, went 152 feet, and he got out.
Seems
And I
fair.
don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe if you there was something ridiculous, like if you hit a ball over 100 miles an hour exit velocity or over 110, you bat 600 or something ridiculous. There's some crazy number like that. So most of the time, if you're hitting a ball that hard, you're going to be safe. So it's unfair to say Avisail Garcia sucks because he got out when he hit the hardest ball in all of baseball last year. So it's much better, especially when you're talking about predicting. You're looking at the future. It's much better to say he hit a ball 125 miles an hour than to say he got out. Much more accurate for the future.
Right, and that's why it's going to be good that StatCast finds its own version of WAR because Fangraphs and Baseball Reference and Baseball Prospectus all have their formulas, and none of them are the same because you often look at the different sites and they all have different numbers for certain guys. But
well, yeah, and I'll say I mean, before that stuff came out, I came up with my. Well, maybe not before. Simultaneously, I came up with my player of the game system, which was initially just devised to figure out who was the best player in any given game. It ended up being very similar to the WRC Plus type of thing. But that's what I started working on that. And again, it's just another thing that calculates. You add up numbers and you figure out what's going to happen. But still, it's using all of them use stats, and we don't want them to use stats. We want them to use the raw data, the the seconds, the miles per hour, that type of data, the launch angle, the angle the ball comes off the bat. That's what we want them to use. And I think you may have the most accurate WAR ever, at least as a predictor. Again, this is for predicting the future, not for looking at the past. But I think StatCast could easily have the most accurate one ever based off of this. And it will be very interesting to see how their WAR numbers compare to the other ones. Is Mike Trout still by far the best? I would guess that he is, but maybe he isn't.
I mean, just going off
Maybe
of that,
some of the
Mike Trout last year had this new thing they're using. It's called barrels. How many times you're hitting the ball in the barrel of the bat, which is where you want it to be.
yes.
It's 57. He was actually below guys like Chris Davis the K from Oakland. Mark Trumbo actually had more barrels than Mike Trout. David Ortiz and Nelson Cruz, Miguel Cabrera had the most at 72. So you have stuff like that in there, guys who are hitting the ball
Yeah,
on the barrel
but
of the
we
head.
already know Miguel Cabrera's ridiculous. And I mean, if you look at the exit velocity, that I still have that up there. Essentially, the top 20 is a few guys. Like I said, Garcia's number one. It's a couple different guys, all different guys on the list, except Giancarlo Stanton, who's up there about 10 times in the top 20. So, I mean, to me, I've always said Stanton is one. I wish I could have seen him play more. If he was in the American League, I'd get to see him play more. I don't watch a whole lot of Marlins games,
Assuming he's healthy.
but he's always been one of the most exciting guys for me, and I'm really excited he's playing for Team America in the World Baseball Classic.
I wonder if they'll have StatCast for
I
that.
just turned her back around. I bet they will.
You sent us backwards, and I'm just going to refuse to participate
anyway,
in World Baseball Classic discussions.
I think you could see a guy like Stanton all of a sudden being like your top WAR player in the National League. Maybe over someone like Bryce Harper or whatever you want to say. I think you could see, because of that exit velocity, because of the launch angle, that type of thing, he could end up being considered the top hitter in the National League, which I think Bryce Harper is generally considered at the moment.
Nolan Arenado,
that could be completely wrong. Yeah, he's another one that's up there. And Carlos Gonzalez is on this list a few times too, so I mean he's going to be up there as well. But I think Stanton, to me, he's got to be a top 5 player now, and I think a lot of time he gets disrespected. But I think a stat like this is going to maybe bring him back some respect. Maybe it brings back some to Miguel Cabrera, who has been like they've been the poster child of this debate, the WAR versus RBI debate, where the old schools like Miguel Cabrera because he hits the dingers, and the new schools like Mike Trout because he actually plays some defense and runs bases and is essentially Mickey Mantle. So it'll be interesting to see where this StatCast comes in line, and if maybe it could bring these two sides together. There's no reason for these two sides to hate each other like they do. It's so stupid. It really is dumb. For these two sides, they don't hate something because you don't understand it, and if you're the new guy, don't hate what got you there. Yeah, everything now is built on that stuff from the past. Everything is. So don't hate the old stuff just because you have new stuff.
That's why I laugh at people who are covering the Browns now because they're using analytics, and people are laughing that they use like card tricks or memorization tools at the combine last week. Not to cross over too much into the Browns, but people don't, like you said, people don't understand it. So they're making fun of the Browns for this approach they're taking, but that's because a lot of them have no clue what's going on, and they don't have access to what is being used by the Browns. Like they're so vague. Like the Browns never said what they're doing analytically. We have no idea what analytics to that means. But in baseball, you have a lot of information. There's probably still a lot we don't know, but there's so much information. Like it's free for you to read, and especially if you're a beat writer, if you're covering baseball, there's so much information available to you to learn this stuff. And if you're just going to make fun of it because you don't have the time to read, that's really annoying. I agree. There's no reason to hate each other because it's relevant to your beat. If you cover baseball, this stuff is relevant to you. I don't care if you don't like it or not, but it's relevant.
And you're talking about writers, but you're talking about writers, and I'm talking about fans. Although I still think there's probably a place in both of it, though. I mean, if you're a writer and you're catering to an older, if you're a 70-year-old baseball fan or a 50-year-old baseball fan, and you don't like computers and you never use computers and you don't trust them and you just like to sit there and watch baseball, I don't see any problem with that at all. And I think there should be writers who are catering to you and talking about RBI and runs scored and whatever, who hate pitch counts and all that type of stuff. I think there should be someone catering to you. And if you're the new school, then there should be more people catering to you because that's where this is going. And we're going to train the younger guys to do this. Everyone growing up now is going to be on this. Most people are going to be on this new school. That's just generally the way it goes. Even if they aren't 100% on it, they're
They
going to
know.
be pushing towards that way. I will say the one thing I remember now from that one negative article that I was talking about was they were saying that they could sit at home and not watch the games and be an armchair GM. You know who else was an armchair GM? My grandpa, who was in his 90s and never heard of the word war except for the one he fought in. Everybody's been an armchair GM since forever. Like, since baseball existed, people have been saying, "Oh, they got to cut this guy." My father-in-law does this shit too. You know, he wanted to cut Johnny Peralta, and I love Johnny Peralta. Like, you know, he'll just pick these. They'll pick a guy because of what his face looks like, or because of his batting average, or all those people that hate Carlos Santana. It's got nothing to do. The stat people don't hate Carlos Santana. It's the old school people that hate Carlos Santana and want to cut him. They're the ones pretending to be armchair, GMs. Everybody has always done it forever in every sport, in everything. So don't talk about it like it's some brand new millennial thing because of Fangraphs that people are starting to talk like this. It's always existed forever and will exist for all eternity. And
It's
I
just
think
for a
that's a good
different
way to
value.
end this.
Okay. I will say this: you mentioned
I think
about
that's
people
it.
coming up with stats more now. MLB The Show has their version of StatCast. I forget what it's called, but I was looking at some of the previews, and they have a StatCast option on the game. So like they'll break down launch angle and exit velocity and distance covered by an outfielder and top speed. So anybody who plays a video game is gonna learn about this stuff too. So I think a lot of people play that game.
Can you
Especially
still run through people? Can you control a player and run through another player?
I think they've gotten past that. I think we've come a long way since then.
I haven't played an MLB video game. I'm too old for that. I'll play other stupid video games, but I'm too old school to go back now, I think, and play MLB video games. It was fun in
They
high
have a,
school, though.
they have a retro mode on MLB The Show. You can play a
No,
90s version
I
of
don't. I don't have the time. I can't go. I'm not doing that. All right, that's it for today. We will come back again probably maybe next week, maybe 2 weeks. We'll see. We got to get those basketball guys a chance to get another one out in between in case that's what you're listening for. I watched 30 seconds of the Suns game tonight. So that was
That's
my
exciting.
basketball input. If you want more basketball, I'm sure Danny and Ben will be back soon. Anyway, that's it for us. I've been Joe at Burning River BB on Twitter. He's been Justin at JL_baseball on the Twitter. Read us both at burningriverbaseball.com and have a great night.